This year I used 3 different notebooks to help organize my daily life, including a bunch of different layouts, some that worked, some that didn't. So let's have a flip through and look at all of the layouts that I used across the year. These are the 3 notebooks that I used to help me get my stuff together and make sure I showed up where I needed to at the time I said I would, and did the things I needed to do. This one is the A5 Galaxy Drip notebook from Archer and Olive. I call this one my yearly collections journal because it holds all of my year-long trackers. This square foliage notebook, also from Archer and Olive, was what I call my everyday journal. This one lasted me from January through to June, and this A5 Wonderstruck notebook lasted me from July through to December. Starting at the start, a very good place to start. In my yearly collections journal, as said, this is where I have anything that's going to last me the full year. I put those collections in here rather than in my everyday journal because I don't want to set them up again at the mid-year point, but because I don't have enough yearly collections to fill an entire notebook, I've actually been using this one since 2022. We already have flip-throughs of the pages for 2022 and 2023 on the channel, so jumping ahead to 2024, the first layout that I set up here was for my word of the year. This year the word I went with was conscious, and I had a little definition space, a space to say why I picked the word, and then next to this I had a summary space for my goals. Notably, I never came in and wrote my goals down for quarter 4, the main one has been Vlogmas, but essentially for each of the months of the year I could just write a summary of what I was working on or what I hope to achieve. I do like having this snapshot, so it is something I've included for next year, but after this one, we get into my smaller goals for the year, or what I call my 101 things list. This is 101 things that I wanted to do across the year, some of them larger, most of them small. A good chunk of these are things that I want to do for fun, or maybe tasks that I've been putting off and I just wanted to get done. But I did find that for 2024, I didn't actually fill in the entire list. I know there are a couple of items in here that have actually been done and I can check off. For instance, celebrating my birthday being one of them, and paying off my student loan, and the intention is never really to push myself to get every single one of these things done, but it makes for like a nice memory page of thinking about what did I accomplish, and also what was important enough to me that I thought I might want to do it. In terms of filling it in though, you can see I got up to 67, plus the 2 we have over here, so 69 items. Not quite 101, and that's why I am going to be cutting down the list for next year, only doing 52 instead. After this though, the next layout we have is my 24 24s in 2024. Effectively, this one is 24 things that I wanted to do 24 times across the entire of the year. You can see that some of these I have hit 24 so far, some of them are a fair bit lower. I do also know that this isn't completely up to date because I did just do some future me problems the other day, so I can put a couple more dots on that one. But so that I made sure that I didn't accidentally either record something twice on here or forget to record it, what I also have on these subsequent pages are the instances of all of these things. So for instance, which social outings and events did I go to? When Vogel and I had date days and date nights, what did we get up to? Just to make sure I have recorded the ones I mean to and haven't doubly recorded them. So those ones are all on these subsequent pages. I just cut down the side of the page and then have these little tabs, which I think are pretty cute. It's good to see the very full ones and maybe not so great to see the ones that haven't been filled in as much. It could also be though that I just didn't remember to fill them in. For instance, for physical self-care tasks and mental self-care tasks, I probably did more than the 9 and 6 that I've recorded. It was just whether in the moment I kind of paid enough attention to think, yes, I should write that down in my journal. This layout here I was calling That's New. I really enjoy trying new things, like, celebrating novel holidays, going to new places, trying new foods, and I wanted a space to record all of those. But given the fact that most of these got filled in January, I got a little bit worried that I was not going to have enough space, and then I just held myself back from writing anything down and ended up with a lot of empty space. Probably needed a little bit more thought on my part about the layout and how many new things I was potentially going to be trying. But after this one, we have my future me problems. This one is a staple in my setup. I always like to include this. This is essentially just a list of those things that I want to do at some point, but they're not for today, they're probably not for tomorrow, maybe not even this week or month, but I want to get around to them eventually. So I'm putting them on the plate of future me. There are definitely a couple of these that have been done, and probably some that I'm going to be I don't know, abandoning, eliminating, cancelling when it comes to the end of this year. I won't be bringing those forward into the new year. But again, this is also a kind of nice memory keeping page of what was important to me at the time. Like for 2024 Jess, at some point in the year, she thought it was important to do XYZ. Flipping over though, on our next layout, we have a space for my savings and a space for bills. I also didn't do very well at filling this one out. I just don't think that this is how I want to record my savings. I think I more so prefer having a little box that I can color and say, oh yes, I saved XYZ amount. And while I do think the idea of recording when my bills come in is important, I don't necessarily have a specific reason to have that information outside of just knowing when they pop up. This might also be something that I record in a digital space rather than in my journal, because then I can put it on my calendar, like my Outlook calendar or something like that. Over here we have home projects. This one I did really enjoy having. It was just nice to have them all summarized in the one spot and check them off as we got things done. And then after this one, we have my statistics related to social media. The way these ones work is that we have each of the months of the year, we have the starting value, ending value, and the change. And then at the very end of the year, I can also record what the difference is between the 1st of January and the 31st of December. That change I'll just write in there. So we have the first statistics spread, then we have the second one, we then have the third one, and I thought I was done, but I did end up actually going and adding one after these other pages. So we have another one here in the back, mainly because we introduced the podcast after I'd done my initial setup, and we also made a new space for the Bujo Buddies book club. But flipping back, because we're not quite done here, we also had this page, which was supposed to be my monthly memories, but I didn't end up using this one, and there are two main reasons. One of them was the design of the layout. I didn't like that these two were as close as they were, and these two as well, so the page didn't look as nice as I wanted it to. Like, it's kind of cute, it's okay, but that really irked me. And I also didn't make a plan for myself in terms of how I was gonna fill these in. Also, I do technically have monthly summaries in my 5-year journal, so I don't really need them in here as well. It's kind of a duplicating of information. But after this one, we then have my then and again, which is a staple. I will continue to include this. And on the right hand side, we have my letter to me. So that one's just in a little envelope. I typed it up, printed it off, and put it in here. So then when, the clock strikes midnight, I can get this one out and have a read. Though I'll probably be in bed by that point, so maybe I'll read it on the 1st of January. What I'll also be doing at the end of the year though is filling in my responses to these prompts for my December 31st logging. And then over the page we have what is going to be my year in review. Initially I was planning on doing this one in kind of a sketch note style, so adding to it throughout the year rather than doing it all at the end of the year. But because I didn't do it for January, I then didn't do it for February, so on and so forth, and here we have a blank spread. It is going to get filled, just isn't filled right now. After this one though, that is where I put in the additional statistics page, and I'm hoping that for the statistics pages I've set up for next year, I have enough space. I just need to make sure I don't take on any new social media projects. No starting any new channels, or Instagrams, or anything like that. While that's what I have in my yearly collections journal, we then also have my everyday journals. The first of which was this square notebook from Archer and Olive. Opening this one up though, on the inside cover I decided to include a flip out. If we just scoot this guy to the side for a second, you can see that this one was for my daily, fortnightly, cyclic, and monthly planning processes. Effectively just little lists of things that I wanted to do on those different time frames, because at the start of the year I decided I was going to go to a quarterly, cyclic, fortnightly planning system rather than an annual, monthly, weekly system. Parts of that stuck, parts of it didn't. One of the big ones that didn't stick was fortnightly, mainly because once you start organizing things into cycles, weeks don't seem as bad anymore. For reference, a cycle is a 4-week period, a fortnight is 2 weeks, so if you split it into 2 2-week periods, it doesn't really seem as necessary anymore. You can just do 4 weeks. Given the fact that I was trying to go to fortnightly to avoid the kind of blinders that I put on in terms of my organization and time management, I found I didn't really have that as a problem anymore when I went to cyclic planning anyway. Putting that one back though, we also had some sticky notes on the inside cover here, one of these being for my shopping list and just being able to check off when I got certain things. This was stuff primarily that I wasn't getting at like the grocery store, but more so, hey, when you go to the stationery store, make sure that you get XYZ. I also had one for following up with in terms of things for Vogel, my partner, so stuff that we could talk about at our household meetings, but I didn't end up using that one quite as much, so I didn't end up carrying it forward into my next journal. On to the first doc grid page though. On this one I put a year at a glance. While you can fit more than just a year in a square notebook, I decided to just add some decoration down the side. And my general decorative theme for my start of journal setup was very much based around the idea of gold paint, black paper, and this washi tape. So pretty, look at that gold shininess. But on to the next layout. This one was effectively a quarterly overview. It does actually have 14 weeks, not just 13 like we have in a quarter, but this just helped to give me a bird's eye view of my plans for the quarter at the start of the quarter. I found I didn't really use it so much throughout the quarter. It was more so just there to put in my plans as I had planned them at the very start. I did go through and update it every so often, but for the most part this was really just useful for me at the start to see where everything fit together, what I had time for, what I didn't have time for. This highlighted section here is reset week. That was something new that I introduced this year, but more on that when we actually get to that week in the notebook. After this, I wanted to have some calendars for my content releases. These ones I put in monthly, so like a monthly calendar rather than a cyclic calendar, mainly because with my perk releases for Patreon and the YouTube channel, those ones release monthly because the charge is monthly, so it made more sense to have those summarized in a way that was a monthly schedule as well. So we have January here, February, you can see that we've got a Dutch door here so I could see what was written on this panel. After February, we have March. I really love the gold paint on the edges of these pages. I just think it's really pretty. And then just a decorative panel down the other side here. After this one, we then had what is probably one of the biggest wastes of a spread in this journal. I'm not sad about it. It was a learning opportunity. But when I set this up, I knew I wanted to have this space to summarize the tasks that I wanted to do from my 101 things list and map them to each of the cycles. But I wasn't too sure what to do with this page, so I just drew in a bingo grid and was like, I'll deal with that later. Would not recommend. Don't set up layouts unless you actually have an idea about how you're going to use them. I decided eventually that I was going to use this to summarize date days that Vogel and I were having, but I only recorded 2 of them. And the idea was like, oh yeah, across the year we'll go on 25 different dates. But I knew I was only going to be using this notebook for 6 months, so that doesn't really work. Oh well, we live and we learn. On to the next layout. This one is what I call a routine builder. So you write down all of the tasks that you want to do on like a weekly or fortnightly basis, possibly monthly, and then each of these columns represents the week number. Underneath the relevant column, you can put in a dot or some kind of signifier to say, yes, I plan on doing this task in this week. And then once it actually gets done, you can check it off. I did not use this, which is a shame because I love the idea of it. I just haven't been able to figure out how to get it to work for me. Maybe it would make more sense as a removable tracker or something so I can take it to the week that I'm actually working on or something, but I did not find myself turning back here. Similarly, I did not find myself turning back to this one, which is also a shame because this layout worked really well for me in the journal I had before this. The idea here is that you set yourself 2 kind of challenges or 2 kind of routines you're trying to build, habits, and for each of those you give them a high bar and a low bar for completion. In the case of my one, the high bar was in this kind of pink color, and the low bar, or the kind of entry level, soft version of completing the routine, that one was done in grey. Any day I just didn't do it though, that was in black. And when I got to the end of the 4th week and had like the whole week filled in black, I was like, yeah, nah, we're just gonna leave that one. Something that I do love doing in my journal though is reflection. And I thought it would be kind of cool to have a reflection summary page. So in this case, we have all 3 cycles for the first quarter. So effectively January, February, and March. And for each of those, we have a space to record my wins from the cycle, my challenges, any lessons that I learned, and memories. What I soon found out though is I actually prefer to record this with the month or with the cycle in question, while having it as a summary kind of layout can be good, especially if like you're facing the same challenges time and time again. It's like, okay, this is notably a problem area, what are we doing about this? But while I used it fairly well for cycle 1, I didn't use it very consistently after that. It was after this point that I kind of realized, actually we just need to add that back into my regular monthly or cyclic setup. But after this one, we have what is again a kind of disappointing layout in that I didn't go and scaffold anything in here and thus didn't really utilize it. The idea here is that I was going to use this space to plan out my reset for the quarter. So what was I going to be doing in reset week? And on this layout, I was going to use it for planning the next quarterly pages, because all of the ones we had so far were really only for the first 3 months of the year, but this was going to be a 6-month journal. I know that this spread would have worked way better for me if I actually went in ahead of time and scaffolded out different sections that I needed to fill in, but because I didn't do that, the use that it got was kind of minimal. After this though, we're into the first month or cycle for the year, so January 1st to January 28th, or what I effectively ended up just calling January. Yes, it does say cycle 1 here, but I ended up doing away with that. It just made it easier when talking to other people about my plans and stuff to call it January, because notably not as many people do cyclic planning as do monthly planning. On this side here though, we have my actions list, so just thinking about the different goals I had and what I wanted to do for those. Some of them got a lot of stuff done, some of them not so much, but I do also know I kind of decided to target quite a few goals at once, which is a lesson I have to keep relearning. It is just a lot better if I focus on a handful, like a small handful of goals, rather than 2 very full handfuls of goals or something like that. On this side though, we have my calendar for the month, or what was effectively standing in as my monthly log. And for these, I wanted to record what kind of things I was doing for each block of time. For me, a block of time was roughly 2 hours, so we had 2 blocks before lunch, 2 blocks after lunch, and 1 block after dinner. The theme that we were going with for January were these simple kind of botanical designs, a nice easy one to ease myself into the year, mainly because I find that with January's in particular, because I will have set up, my new journal set up, my yearly collection set up, maybe a giveaway journal, and then Vogel's journal, like, I just get a little bit creatively burnt out. So when it comes to January, I do like to do something a little bit easier. As said though, at the start of the year, I was trying my hand at fortnightly planning. So this layout here, which has a Dutch door, was for weeks 1 and 2. We have a box for each of the days of the fortnight, a little space for notes, and a space for tasks. And then on the other side of the Dutch door, we have all of my trackers. So a habits or routine tracker, a meal log, a meal plan for our dinners in particular, the things that I needed to do with regards to content, whether that be for YouTube or for my memberships. Or also the Archer and Olive blog related stuff, because I was doing that at the start of the year. After this one though, we then get into my daily logs. 2024 was very much the year of daily logs. I've found them very useful in my planning and just getting things done, getting my thoughts onto paper. In January, I was using those time blocks, so scheduling out roughly what I wanted to do with my day, and then checking off to say, yes, I did that, or crossing off to say, nope, something else happened. For this one, we have a day per column. That's not necessarily how it works every single day. Notably, we had a little bit of extra space on Saturday. Then moving over the other side, we have a Sunday column, a Monday column, Tuesday fit down here, but then also carried over to there, so technically I guess it didn't fit there anyway. This was a space for my course planning and figuring out the modules and stuff. We had other little spots to plan things as well, which was fun. I enjoy dailies because you can just fit these little modules in amongst the other stuff, like stuff that I want to do in Melbourne. I had a space for a brain dump. Didn't end up using it, but I had the space for it. But after the 2 weeks of daily logging, then we have the next fortnightly setup. This one I tried to change up a little bit, so just having a larger box here rather than like a small notes section and then a task list. Notably did not really use it. I also took out doing the 5 blocks a day and planning those in here because I'd put them on here and then I'd also put them into the daily logs to say this is what I'm planning on doing, and then I also had them on here. So it's like, that's a bit of duplication, a little bit of redundancy. We don't need all of them, but I was just figuring out my system. It was good to experiment with new things. This meal log is a little bit different. I just filled in as much space as I needed for each of the days, mainly mainly because I was finding that some days I was having a lot of snacks, some days I wasn't having any, some days I would have breakfast, some days I wouldn't. I also wanted to record a couple more pieces of information around my eating. So was I actually hungry? Did I overeat? How did I feel afterwards? That kind of stuff. We have a simplified routine or habits tracker, the little meal plan over here just for dinners, and then 2 additional spots for content, though I only ended up using one of them. After this, we are back into the daily logs. Been looking for that. Get out of there. This is just a magnetic bookmark. It doesn't actually belong in this journal anymore. But you can see we have daily logs, A&O shopping list, tasks to do on my computer, flipping over. This is where I was planning out more stuff for my course. So figuring out different bits and pieces that I needed, noting down when anything had been done, thinking about the workbook, writing in more computer tasks, things that I needed to sell, and then also some daily logs. Flipping over, we then have more daily logs. As I said, I really enjoyed daily logs. One of the things that I did find frustrating this month though, and you might be able to see there's a couple of little stickers in here and such covering over the line work, is that if I wanted to have a box only fit to how many tasks I had in the day, I couldn't really go and draw it in ahead of time. Like notably, I drew this one in and had a bunch of space left over. Similar idea to the brainstorm, we had a little bit of space on this one for Wednesday. I usually flip-flop between them. It's like one month I do the ones with the boxes, and then I get sick of drawing boxes, so the next month I stop using them. But for the next month, cycle 2 or February, I had such high hopes for this setup. What we were actually going to do was a maps theme, but I couldn't get it to work, so I instead ended up going with this red, black, and kind of like ink drawing theme. These ones are all stickers from the washi tape shop. I love this sticker set, I think it's beautiful, but I don't necessarily think that my setup did it justice. Here though you can see we have a cover page for the month, or cycle. We have the actions list looking a little bit pared back compared to the previous month, but with distinctly less done. And that's not to say it didn't get done, but I didn't check it off. Mainly because in cycle 2, or in February, my use of my planner plummeted. I got into such a slump when it came to my journaling. I wasn't feeling inspired by my layouts, I just didn't really want to get in here and record stuff. As said, I loved the stickers, I just don't really like how I used them. On this one though, we had the work outputs layout, so thinking about what do I need to do for videos, for the blog, for Instagram. This was supposed to be for the course, but I just ended up using those layouts I had in the January pages. And then after this, we're into my fortnightly setup, but I left myself a note saying went to Melbourne in week 6, so a lot of this went unused. Didn't check in with this journal at all. So I used it a little bit in week 5, but then because week 5 was the week before I went away, it's usually busier. When I'm busy, I don't tend to use my journal. So just didn't really work out as well as it could have. But we've got each of the days of the week, or rather the days of the fortnight, because it's week 5 and 6. And then on the other side, we have the meal log, which I fell off with, the habit tracker, which I fell off with, the fortnightly actions, which I never ended up filling in. The idea behind that box though is that I was going to take actions from my action log, so from what we had at the start of the month here, and just pull out specific ones that I wanted to do. The problem is, during this fortnight, week 5 was really busy and week 6 I was away, so I didn't really have that many actions to pull out other than focus on your work, which isn't on your actions list. Over the page though, and into the daily logs, this part at least got used a little bit better, but you can see I did away with those boxes because I was sick of drawing them out. I still had the little time ladder or time blocks that I was using, so the 5 periods a day at least, though it seems that for this one I expanded it to 6. At least for some of the days of the fortnight. In amongst those, I had some of those stickers. Again, love the stickers. Don't love how I use them. I like the idea of having the red dot to indicate the start of a list though, so this was Patreon tasks, YouTube tasks, cycle 3 setup tasks, which it's interesting that I already put in my cycle 3 setup before I'd even done my fortnightly setup for week 7 and 8. On the Monday of week 7, I got back from my trip and I was like, okay, we're gonna use our journal, we're gonna get straight back into it. I filled in my tracker for the first day and then flopped. Oh well, I tried. I then of course tried again the next week to get into it and fill this out and specify what I was gonna do with each of my blocks of time and all of that. And yeah, I think I was just calling time of death on this setup in particular. I tried to do the Alistair method because that's something that's worked for me previously. I'm like, maybe this will motivate me to use my journal. mixed bag on that. But it's okay, because we were coming into a new cycle, which meant a fresh setup. I'm a big fan of a fresh start. It can kind of help us like remotivate ourselves, get excited about the new period of time. And I will say I did very much like this theme more than I liked the last one. I think I just did a better job of it. In similar fashion though, we start off with the actions list, and this time just focusing on the one goal, which was the goals course. That one has been one of my biggest accomplishments for this year. There's more information in the description box if you're curious about it. But for cycle 3, I bought back the mini calendar, thinking I could just note down what I was doing, considering just 3 blocks of time rather than 5 or 6. And also color code this based on, was it a work task, was it kind of like a personal or around the house task, or was it more like a social or for fun thing? The idea was to use this box for a monthly task list. Did not notably use that, but that's okay. And then we have the monthly log, or cyclic log I suppose, where I could record other happenings and also other work outputs and stuff like that. I decided to color code this, so anything that was like a personal task or an appointment or anything like that was in blue, and then anything that was content related was in brown, just using the colors from my color palette. And then after this one, we have an expanded version of my work outputs. So here we have a schedule for the cycle, and also a 5th week for reset week, because the content keeps coming in reset week. We had a space to summarize the videos I was working on, the membership perks. Flipping over, you can see each of these are on waterfall Dutch doors, which I fell in love with this year, but this next one is all about reels, because I was trying to get into doing reels. I did well for a little bit, but I think vertical videos is just not where my heart is. I much prefer this format, and you can't really fit the amount of video that I have in this format into a reel. I was okay with photos though, so we also have photos that I was going to post on Instagram. And then after this we have podcast notes. I tried a few iterations of this podcast planner and I just couldn't really find a style that fully worked for me. This was the first iteration though, so noting down episodes 2, 3, and 4 of our podcast. That one's also been another kind of like fun accomplishment from this year. It was really exciting to start that as a project. We have tasks for Archer and Olive, so writing their blog post, sorting out the printable, the video, the reel. And I've also got a section at the bottom for a year of planning, but after this is again where I was going to put stuff related to the goals course, but I just kept using the stuff that I had back in January, so I didn't really need this page. The butterflies are pretty though, at least it looks nice. But flipping on over, I had kind of decided by this point that maybe fortnightly planning wasn't really what I needed. While I did like the idea of it for, you know, reducing the time blinders that I'd have in any given week, by this I effectively mean when you're working on tasks within a week and all you can think about is that week in particular. Like no other weeks exist, there is no future beyond this week. And then you get to the end of the week and realize you're going to start the cycle all over again. I do think that this year, with moving to cyclic planning though, and just having those 4-week blocks, the struggle that I was having with this weekly time blinders kind of thing has certainly lessened. So I don't really miss the fortnightly planning. It was a fun experiment though. Starting off the daily logs though, we have pre-cycle tasks, so things that I wanted to do before Monday the 26th. And then after this, we're just doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm not too sure what this line is for. I think maybe I started doing Monday here and then thought I was going to need more space for it or something, but it's all good. I used the space thoroughly, I feel good about that. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we had a space for getting things done, a space for a brain dump, a very thorough brain dump it seems. It went across 2 full columns. Oh, and also onto the next page. Here is where I used the wrong pen and was just a little bit devastated. It's okay, I survived. I notably continued journaling, I didn't quit. But I really love daily logging for how full it makes my pages a lot of the time. Obviously, as I get towards the end of the month and I'm trying to predict how much space I'm gonna need before I set up new pages, that's where I can get a little bit messy in terms of how much space I've given to days and then not using it all or anything like that. But in general, I just love that everything gets used up and it feels full, and I just enjoy layouts when they feel used and lived in a lot. But after the end of this cycle, we're then at the end of the quarter, and that means that we have reset week. This was the first setup that I did for reset week, so I wasn't too sure what I was going to need, and notably I should probably have included some space for just regular everyday planning, like maybe some space for some dailies. But instead I had a space to outline my reset areas, and then I selected several of those and broke them down into things I could do. So what could I do for my home reset, organizational reset, work, mental health, physical health. I also had a space for general happenings because I notably didn't have any daily log space, and then also a space for a brain dump, which got used a little bit. I loved how bright and cheery this was. It's definitely a favorite tape set of mine, even though I don't usually consider yellow to be one of my favorite colors. I enjoyed doing this lettering, I just really loved how it came together, but it certainly would have been better with having some daily logging space for the week in particular. After this though, we are then into my quarterly setup for quarter 2. So you can see we have the return of the quarterly overview, this time with a couple more week highlights because we had a trip to Melbourne, we had the trip to Texas for Go Wild, we have reset week, and then I also just tried to go in and map things that I was going to be doing. Every time I come back to this page, I see that green dot and I know it means something, but I cannot, for the life of me, remember what it meant. This would have been April 13th, I guess. I'm not too sure what would have happened on April 13th, outside of the fact that it was cocktail day, but I would have put the dot beside cocktail day if it was going to be related to that, so I'm not too sure. But again, this was a layout that was more useful in the initial setup of it than it was throughout the quarter. After this though, we'll get to you in a second. I tried again to do the routines layout, and I don't want to say I failed because I don't like the idea of I failed a layout. It's more so it just gave me something to learn about myself as a planner, but it definitely taught me that I needed to put this layout to bed. I did not bring this into the next quarterly setup, but over here we have my projects list because I was reading the book Building a Second Brain around the time of setting up some of these layouts, so I thought it would be good to actually record the projects that I've been working on. Admittedly, I didn't actually end up recording them here, I ended up recording them in my monthly pages, so this layout ended up not getting used quite so much. But as said, I'm not really too worried if I don't use a layout because I don't really see that as a failing of journaling or a failing of planning. It's just an opportunity to learn more about what does or doesn't work for us. For instance, this layout I have used previously and it has worked really well for me, and that's why I put it in, but when I set it up last time, it was in a smaller journal. That meant that I didn't have as much real estate, which meant that I ended up making better use of that page or of the space. I didn't have as much white space left over in the last version of this. Because when I did this one for Go Wild, I did end up with a lot of blank space around it. When it came to planning for Melbourne, I just decided to do that in amongst my monthly pages rather than come back to here. I also found that while this tape set is so gorgeous and I held on to it for the longest time because I absolutely loved it, it was just really hard to find color matches for. And while I think I did the best job I could have with the materials I had, I didn't necessarily like how these layouts came together, so I probably didn't use them because of that as well. I'm very much the kind of person who is going to be way more inclined to use their planner or use their journal if I like the way it looks. This layout though was a condensed version of my content calendar, so we had the little monthly calendars at the top, and then we had checklists underneath this for all of my membership perks. The idea was that I could come in here and note them down on the calendar as to when they were going to happen and then check them off and such as they did get done. And while I went to the time and effort to write all of these out, I found that this is not how I like to refer back to this information. I don't mind using it as a schedule, like coming back to it and having a look to say, okay, when is this stuff happening? I'll populate that on my monthly log. But in terms of actually using this as a tracker, not so much. Still love this tape though, even though it was really hard to find a color match for. This one here was for the A Year of Planning series, so just keeping track of have I prepared the post for it, have I written a caption, have I posted that. I fell off with this at about half year, but at this point we're still in quarter 2, so still had this tracker in here and was filling it in. I also wanted this to be a space where I could write down some notes for our Discord digests, back when that was a little bit more frequent, when there was enough stuff kind of happening in the Discord, or like things were changing more in the Discord, so I felt like I had to kind of give people more of a heads up. We've kind of gotten to a space where most of our spaces and channels to talk in the Discord are a little bit more stable now. We don't have as many kind of like becoming new or going away or anything like that. And if you wanted to join our Discord, it's a great community of people. We would love to have you with us. That one's also linked in the description box. We have a little space for ideas though, and then after this we have my planning pages, which you can see I actually scaffolded out. And I still didn't really use them, but at least I scaffolded them out. You can see that I was going to use this space to plan out my monthly setups, so I did actually go and put the tape in that I used for my dragons theme. Never ended up doing any swatches or colours for May flowers, and I didn't do anything for cycle 3, or I guess cycle 6, or my new journal setup. I just kind of planned that in my scribble book rather than in my journal. But I did at least note down that I had one idea that I wanted to include, which was top one-liners or quotes that hit. I did end up including that, so like at least the one idea I recorded on here actually got done. Flipping over though, and we are into the April setup, or what is going to be effectively cycle 1 of quarter 2, or cycle 4, depending on how you want to consider it. This is another tape that I absolutely loved. I think that the gold is so pretty, and I love this kind of like panel design, and the dragon in the middle here just looking absolutely gorgeous. For this month we have the actions list, and then the monthly dashboard broken down into work, home, personal, and next. But this was also a month that I found it a little bit challenging to get into my journal, because if we flip back, we'll note that this was also when I was going to Texas, which meant that there was a period I was away. When I'm away, I don't really use my journal, and also it meant that the period before this was super busy trying to get everything ready to release on the channel while I wouldn't be around, and when I'm busy, I don't use my journal very much. That's why this one is probably looking maybe a little bit lacking. I will say though, even though there is this tendency that I don't use my journal as much when I am busy, I've actually found that towards the end of this year that isn't the case anymore. So while December has been really busy for me, I've actually used my journal a lot in December. Not that this is December, but you know, we'll get to that. We have the cyclic calendar, or the 4 weeks and what's going on. Again, using that color coding of yellow for like personal or general tasks, and then the orange to indicate anything that was for the channel. And then after this one, we have those work outputs, but done a little bit more condensed, so not quite as many of those Dutch doors. We have the podcast notes here, photos that I was posting and the things I wanted to do for those. And then over here we had video content, memberships, and a summary of everything. It's funny how I decided to post Instagram photos while I was away, but didn't really seem to post very many when I got back. Maybe I just need to go away more to be more consistent on Instagram. That seems like a really silly way to do that, but this was also when I noted that the reflections at the start of the journal with kind of like summaries of all 3 cycles in the quarter wasn't really working out, so I wanted to put the reflections back into my monthly pages. Even though I didn't use my journal as much as I would have liked in the whole month of April or cycle of cycle 4, I did at least get into this layout and fill in some of the boxes. So I'm considering this to be a win, even though we do have a lot of empty space. I didn't want to start the next week here, so I put in a note space, even though I didn't really need one. And then we are into weeks 14 and 15, because I thought I would give fortnightly planning a try again, even though it hadn't been as successful as it could be. For these 2 weeks in particular though, because they were the 2 weeks leading up to Go Wild, I did find that this didn't work too bad. I did get in and fill in my meals, I did fill in my routine tracker. We have the ever faithful, ever reliable daily logs, so filling all of those in, just having some little boxes of decoration every so often. And then you can see this one is Wednesday 17th, and then we're at Thursday 25th because I went away. I didn't use my journal. I don't know if I even took my journal with me because I knew I wasn't really going to use it. But then we just have the last little bit of the month, or last little bit of the cycle, before we're into the next one. Even though I was going with cyclic planning, I had to say it's gonna be May because it is a tradition. I absolutely loved these florals. They are so pretty. And because May is in autumn for me, I think that the colour palette made a lot of sense. But here you can see is the first kind of like start of reintroducing my monthly reflections at the start of my monthly setup, rather than in the middle or at the end. I wanted to have this space available from the start of the month so that I could jot things down as they happened. And it did take me a few iterations to get used to actually getting in and using it, but I'm feeling good about the use that they're getting currently, even if in May it was looking a little bit sparse. On the other side of this one, we just have a general task list for the month, most of those being related to the coursework. You can see I said huge progress on epic goals, which is excellent to see. After this though, we have the monthly calendar, or cyclic calendar. I've always find my relationship with the monthly log to be kind of interesting. If I include it, I don't use it as fully as I would like to, and if I don't include it, I get annoyed and miss it, so One day, the monthly log and I will just get along a little bit better. But in this setup, we had the florals, we had the craft paper. I love craft paper. It just adds such a nice touch to layouts, makes them feel really kind of cozy and warm. Probably because of the colour, but this is our work outputs layout, again just done with the singular Dutch door. So we have the overall summary of what's happening, we have the videos, membership perks, the photos, podcast related tasks, notably did not actually go and fill those in, also just didn't need this much space for it because we release one episode every 2 weeks, which means in any cycle we're only releasing 2 episodes, so having enough space to plan 4 is a little bit overzealous. I decided to try my hand at doing a monthly tracker, so having meals in here, doing that same kind of style of just writing down the initial for each of the meals, and thus only using as much space as I needed to in any given day. I did a fairly good job. I got up until the 13th at least, which is about the first 2 weeks, which is pretty typical for any monthly tracker in me. I usually make it to mid-month and then I fall away. We had a little routines tracker down the side here, and then after this one we're into my daily logs. I said it before, I'll say it again, I love my daily logs. Notably, didn't do the best job predicting space every single day, especially because I was doing the every second line highlight, so I didn't want to highlight over a space that I was going to end up putting a header for the day, so I kind of had to predict how much space I was going to need. Sometimes I did okay, sometimes I didn't do it quite as well as I could have, but that's alright. In amongst these we have other lists like square layout ideas. The rest of these are just dailies. This one was me doing some course planning, setting up our community space, the workbook, more daily logs, and amongst all of those we just have the little craft paper elements and some of the PET floral stickers. This was the first point that I did a mid-month goal review in my journal rather than just on a scrap piece of paper or in my head, and I have found these so very helpful. They are definitely a staple in my kind of system now, mainly because, as said, the mid-month point is usually when I start to fall off on things. I start to get a little bit more demotivated, thinking like, I'll just wait until next month to do the things I want to do. No, we still have time in the rest of the month, so let's make it count. The mid-month review is effectively just my way to do that for myself. Some more daily logs though, a little meal plan, even though I had, the meal related section in the monthly setup. If I find I'm not using it, I'll just put in something that I know I will use. It's okay to set up layouts and then add some redundancy because you weren't using the thing you originally set up. After this though, then we are into the next month, next cycle. This one being for June or cycle 6 or cycle 3 or quarter 2. I started off with my reflection space, which I mainly only used for the needs and to try section. This was quite a busy period for me with like launching the course and also going away again. But on this side we have the actions list and the projects list. So as said, I started including these in my monthly setups rather than putting them in that list I had at the start of the quarter. I found this worked a lot better. And in terms of the styling of these pages, I was going with a kind of scrapbooky, vintage kind of vibes. A lot of brown, a lot of beige, but also touches of pink because I wanted it to feel a little bit different to my reading journal setups. I was just having so much fun with this kind of style in my reading journal that I figured I'd bring it into my everyday journal. I think technically the theme is cozy and it feels warm, I think so, just using a colour palette that feels a little bit more warm toned. Jess's eternal struggle with any kind of monthly calendar. And then we're on to the work outputs. This time I decided to put in a full schedule for the 5 weeks, so that is cycle 3 and then reset week. Also noting in when I wasn't going to be around or when I was in theory not doing work because it was reset week, so that I could get that stuff organized ahead of time. Of course, anytime that happens, it means that I get very busy and then I go away and then I neglect my journal, but let's see. We have the stuff related to Epic Goals and getting that launched. We had video content, membership content, and then flipping over here, I had a space to plan the photos. Never got around to doing them though, so a nice empty box. And then another way of organizing the stuff to do for the Planner Pals podcast. This one did work a little bit better, meant that I didn't have to write out all of these tasks for each individual episode, and I could just put in the appropriate number of episodes, even though I only really used it for episode 9. And then in this month, I also decided to add some additional pages, this one being for Vogel's Taskmaster birthday, which is a birthday party that was themed around the show Taskmaster. Long story short, if you haven't seen Taskmaster, it's effectively a bunch of usually usually 5 people. They're typically comedians, and they get challenged with these little tasks, and depending on how well they complete it, they get points. So we had the different teams of just like people that Vogel invited for his birthday, and then the different tasks that we were going to do, and then I made the little task envelopes and stuff, and it was just a lot of fun. I know that Vogel really had a very good time with it. And then over here is where I was going to put my packing list. I ended up writing it on a scrap piece of paper because I was just like, oh my god, I'm so stressed, I can't possibly write neat in my journal. Yes, I am that person. I will avoid writing things in my journal if they're not going to look neat. But I also decided, because I was as busy as I was at that period of time, I was going to try my hand at doing structured weeklies and hopefully have enough space to record everything I needed to. Now, I did stuff this up a little bit because this is week 1. Looks great, love it, very full. Maybe got a little bit close to not having enough space, but I think I did well with it. We then have week 2, where I gave myself space for the running task list. I probably did run out of space on this one because everything is like as full as possible. And then we would have had week 3, but I stuffed up the ordering, and I knew that for week 3, I really needed it to be this kind of a layout instead. I needed to have a lot more space to write down my task list compared to what we had here, which was just a very small task list, because for week 4, I was going away. I just got myself a little confused, and I did think like, oh, can I make it work? Could this be week 3? No, I really did need to have more space. So I just decided to put week 3 here, so Monday 10th through to Sunday 16th, and then over here have the 4th week from Monday 17th through to the Sunday 23rd. Because I was away, I didn't end up filling in any routines or anything like that. Didn't really bother me so much. I did very much enjoy using these layouts. It was also kind of fun to set up weeklies in this notebook, like in a square notebook. And then for reset week, I just gave myself some space to do running task lists. Actually, I think I started this before this week because that line would indicate where I started writing down more things. So this list here is probably from a different week, maybe the week that I ran out of space. That's probably likely. Probably could have labeled that better, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. I've already done this stuff, so no harm, no foul. After this though, we are into the back of journal pages, most of which are blank, but we do have the washi graveyard. So effectively, anytime I'm using a washi tape in my setups and I have the little kind of like offcuts or things that I'm not really going to use in another setup, they're not necessarily worth saving, I'll just stick those in the back here. We also have some of the stickers that we used in Vogel's Taskmaster, and I did actually end up sticking in some of the memorabilia from his Taskmaster, these being just little poems that his friends wrote. None of them are particularly friendly though. And then in the very back we have the back pocket, which just has some little bits and pieces of ephemera and postcards, that kind of stuff. And this one here was the first run of my bookshelf printable. I wanted to make this one for my reading journal, but I also wanted to print off a tester to see how it looked. I just stuck that in here so that I could kind of commemorate the fact that I made it. Notably, this journal was only until June though, and after this one we have the A5 for the second half of the year. You can see that comparing the A5 and the square is definitely larger in the horizontal aspect, but in terms of vertical, it's actually quite similar. This one has 37 dot grid spaces, this one has 38, but I was just missing my A5. A5 is like my tried and true size. I do love the square, I'll probably go back to it at some point, but for now, into this one. I know we're not here just to look at the cover of the notebook, but it is so pretty. I love the holographic foiling. I also love the foliage design, don't get me wrong, it's gorgeous too. In fact, full cover designs in general is kind of where it's at right now, but flipping on into the inside cover, in this one I didn't include a flip out, but I did start to collect little tidbits or quotes that I collected throughout the life of this journal. Anything that kind of resonated with me, felt like a good reminder, I just write it out on a little piece of paper and then stick it into the front with some double-sided tape. One of these was actually a quote from one of you, so there's nothing new under the sun, but sometimes the light refracts through a gem at different angles. I just thought that was really nice. It kind of just takes the pressure off because, funnily enough, I make a lot of idea videos and I do try and bring original ideas to those, but it can make me feel, I don't know, maybe a little bit silly when I say like, you could use a year in pixels for the 6th time, but it's in a different context and not everybody necessarily kind of cottons onto the fact that you can use the same layout in different ways. But anyway, we have the return of the shopping list sticky note because I found it so super helpful from my last journal. Some of the items got carried over from the last one, some of them were completely new, But then after this, I stuck the first awkward page of the journal just onto the front card here so that I could open up to the year at a glance and have this next to my coming up page, or what is effectively like a future log, just specifically for quarter 3, quarter 4, and then anything beyond that. Notably, I don't have any plans for beyond that. I know that's not true. I do actually have some things coming up in January, but just haven't recorded them here. This is another one of those layouts where it's most helpful to have when I first set up the journal. It's not necessarily one that I check back in with all that often. I also find that a lot of this stuff, once I have a date for it, I just record it in my Outlook calendar, so I don't really need to record it in my journal. But I do like the way this layout looks, and I did like filling it in initially, so I have included it in my next setup. In terms of the theme for these pages, I was going with kind of like, I don't want to say a dark academia because that's not really what it was, like slightly witchy vibes, but maybe not so witchy vibes. It doesn't have an actual name, but in terms of the quarterly overview, I actually decided to make this a 6-month overview. So we have 9 weeks here, then flipping over we have another 9 weeks, and after that, we have another 9 weeks. As you can probably tell by how sparsely this is filled in, this is another one which I used more so when I first set up the journal to kind of map out when things were going to be happening, just making sure I had enough time to do stuff. I again used washi tape to block off periods where I wasn't going to be around, and also a different color to indicate reset weeks. So reset week, Sydney bookshop hop, we have another reset week, and then this is notably the new year. I did also find moving into this journal that the pens that I would typically use were smudging more than they had previously. While I've been told there isn't a coating on the Archer and Olive paper, something is certainly different because my pens were not behaving the same, so I ended up having to kind of forfeit my old faithfuls and go in with some new ones. These mini calendars though were just done on computer, so I made the little grids, printed them on sticker paper, and then stuck them into the notebook. This is the condensed version of my outputs log, or effectively my work schedule, just showing me when each of the perks for my memberships were going to come out. I also set up so that I could include other information in here as well, and I did for maybe the first half month a couple of additional things, like you could see Vlogmas down here with all of the little grey dots, but really the main purpose was for the membership perks and just knowing when they were coming out. I did actually end up updating my memberships during this period though, so the data for here isn't quite right as we went through and made sure that the membership perks were things that people actually wanted to see so that we could kind of like double down on that kind of content. If you wanted more information about our membership, that one's got info in the description box as well, but this layout I was using to keep track of getting the perks out. Now, as said, we changed some of these things, so I kind of fell away with using this tracker, and this is another one that I found it was actually more helpful to have these things in my monthly setups rather than all together at the start of the journal. A similar idea being for my email newsletter. That one's been a fun project to build on this year. Another thing that has very much felt like a win, but I was effectively looking at ways that I could consolidate or condense those work output layouts that I had been having in my monthly setups, because they were taking up like 2 full spreads each. So I figured, well, how about I try and take up 2 full spreads once rather than every single month. Mixed success. I decided in the end just to go back to putting it in the monthly, but having it on a singular page rather than multiple spreads. This one was for videos, did okay for maybe 2-3 months on this one, and then decided to just put it into my monthlies. A kind of similar idea with the podcast, more so I just never really came back and checked in with this. I also find it very hard to refer to the podcast by episode number. I'd rather do it by episode title, so I found it hard to be like, okay, episode 13, what topic is that? Have we started that? I can't remember. And then that information was stored digitally anyway, so didn't really need this layout. And the A Year of Planning challenge, I literally set this layout up, and then the week before moving into this planner, decided I was abandoning the challenge. I was just finding that the time, effort, and energy I was putting into the challenge wasn't really having the necessary payoff to warrant the effort I was putting in. So rather than struggling through it for the rest of the year, I decided to reclaim that time and just let it be. Over to the next layout though, this is my kind of leisure dashboard. So the intention here was to pick 25 things to do before 2025. I was going to pick these from my 101 things list, but I also like the idea of tying them to specific numbers. And that's why we have do Vlogmas on 25, because usually it's like, oh, you know, 25 videos because the 25th is Christmas, or have a favorite things day on the 11th because I always have it on my birthday and my birthday's on the 11th. Over this side though, we have intentional ways to spend my leisure time so that I could actually have some ideas of like, okay, you've got a break, what are we going to do with it, rather than just scrolling your phone aimlessly. There is a time and a place for aimless scrolling, but when I'm using my leisure time, I want to be intentional about it. I also wanted to write down any of our date plans and anything that I wanted to explore or learn more about. Use those minimally, could have been used more, but on to the next layout. Then we're into the first monthly setup, or cyclic setup. This one is for July, but I kind of decided I was just gonna stop doing any kind of label to say what the cycle was or what the month was. I mean, technically I had already decided that in cycle 4 by not including it on here, but I just wanted to continue with that in this journal as well. I figured that the decorative style could kind of signify that I was moving into the next period, rather than having to have a big kind of slogan that says, hey, it's July. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just didn't really feel it was super necessary. In this one though, you can see we have the reflections layout up front, so with a space for memories, wins, challenges, lessons, my needs for the next month, and things that I wanted to try, in particular usually in my planner, but also kind of in general. For my monthly dashboard page, or what is kind of a monthly dashboard, it only has 2 sections. We have the actions list, which is for stuff related to my goals, and then my project list for things that I was also working on, but they weren't specifically related to the goals that I set for myself. I wanted to signify, yes, there were actually other things that were taking up my time and attention, which meant that not all of these things would always get done. I find one of the hard things with sharing content like this on the internet that's in your personal planner is people can get a little bit persnickety, being like, oh, you set these goals time and time again, what are you even doing? I'm like, boo you, it's my life, stop judging me. Like, I get it, ouch, thank you for closed captioning my pain, but anyway. We have the monthly calendar, cyclic calendar, which actually got used. Look at how full it is, at least for the first 3 weeks. Let's just ignore the last week. Who even am I filling in the monthly log? Crazy stuff. But I can say it is quite satisfying having it as filled in as this is. And I think that part of this is also due to moving into a new size journal. It's just like I'm a little bit more excited because it feels like a change up. We're doing something new. It's the first month in the new journal, so the motivation is higher. We get in, we fill in the layouts, and we feel good about it. For my theme for this one, we're going with a kind of steampunky kind of theme, mainly relying on these stickers that are kind of steampunk inspired. And something that I started introducing in this journal in particular, we kind of had it in the last month of the last journal, but it was more so formalized when you do it a second time, and that's including project planning pages. For this project, I was planning out my work for the summer creative retreat. I probably could have utilized the space a little bit better, but I wasn't too sure how I needed to use it or what I needed to include, so possibly could have used some more decoration. But then after this, we're into my weekly setup. Now, I do love dailies, don't worry, they are literally right here on the next page, but I wanted to have a kind of weekly dashboard just to outline any priorities that I had, any routines I was working on, and also record my meal plan / meal log. That one was summarized on a single page, and then we're into all of the daily logs. The nice part about this month is that I was using little sticker headers for all of my headers in this setup. One, that meant that I could use fonts that would have taken me a lot longer to actually do myself by hand. And 2, it meant that because I printed these on sticker paper and then just colored them in with my Tombow, I could go and put all of the line highlights down and not really worry about where these headers were going to end up, because I could just stick them over the top and they kind of blend in nicely. In amongst the daily logs though, we just have some other little sections like migrated to pack. On this one, we have our week 2 plan, so priorities, routines, and meals, and then we just continue through with the daily logging. I try and put these weekly boxes in roughly the right place. Like notably, we start with Tuesday here because Monday was over here. But if I had have put week 2 here, then we would have flipped the page and we would have had Saturday and Sunday, and that would have felt a little awkward. So it's all good. It's not perfect, but I still really enjoy this, and this is kind of a style that I've developed throughout this journal. So you can see we get Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday taking up the rest of this page, and then we also have to have the week 3 set up. We had a list of ideas for my B5 layouts video, and then over the page we also have some more daily logging and an invitation to Rachel's birthday party. It took me so many times of having to blur out her address to just be like, stick some washi tape over it, then you don't have to worry about it in post. A much more reasonable way to go about things. But after this one, more daily logs, another weekly setup. You can see that the weekly setups kind of got simpler as I went through, because I'm like, I'm not going to include the meal planner, I'm not using it. Like if we flip back, you can see I did not really get in and fill fill it in, so I just decided I wouldn't include it for week 4. I did include the routines box, even though I didn't fill it in, but as we talked about before, I'm not really too worried if things don't get perfectly filled in. It's always nice when they do, but it doesn't have to happen. Some more daily logs, and then we're into the next month. This one was a coffee theme for August, using the coffee PET tape from the washi tape shop, which was so difficult to get off the backing. Like, when it comes to PET tape, typically I just, take the piece of PET tape, kind of rub my finger across the edge, like towards myself, and then it just picks up the tape. I can just pull it off fairly easily. It's not really a problem. But this tape, because the backing was so thin, it was so super difficult to actually get off the backing. It's fine though, I persevered. I notably did it enough times to decorate my journal. In this one though, we again have the reflection space, we have the actions list and the projects list. This dashboard layout I was just calling working on, and that was the title that I kind of went with moving forward. For the headers in this one, although it does look like it could possibly be hand lettering, it is definitely not my hand lettering. This was a font that I found online, just typed it up and then printed it off on washi sticker paper. This means that it kind of blends a little bit nicer with the page, and although it does give a little bit of transfer after a while, like as the pages kind of close against each other and maybe move or rub a little bit, it does leave a little bit of a shadow sometimes. But strangely, that hasn't really been bothering me. Like, if I used a gel pen and it did that, like if there was transfer with a gel pen, that would give me the heebie-jeebies. But this one hasn't really been too much of a pain. We have the monthly log with a varying amount of use, mainly this last little bit here, and then a couple days didn't really write so much down, but it could just be that there wasn't as much going on, so that's alright. Notably, I was also away during this week, so it is what it is. And although the color palette on this page looks a little bit odd, mainly because I think that this panel doesn't really match as well as it could, I quite liked the combination of this kind of green blue and this grid washi tape. I thought that those were really nice together, and I utilized those throughout the entire of the setup. This page is proof that I can actually use a monthly tracker. Sometimes. This one got completely filled out, even if I didn't have like perfect completion of all of the things every single day, but I think I did a really good job on this. I'm actually quite proud. Tiny round of applause for past Jess. She did the thing, she took care of herself. And this is also where I started to reintroduce self-care bingo. I really love self-care bingo. It's just, effectively a board of things that you can do to take care of yourself. Sometimes fun, sometimes not so fun. I opted to draw this one into my planner, just going with a 3x3 grid. So each of these boxes are 4 centimeters across and 4 centimeters up, so that I could have a border around the outside. As things were done, I just colour them in, and while typically I could colour over the top of a Topo Fudnosuke and not have any kind of smudging or smearing, this paper chose violence, so I had to be very careful with the colouring in to make sure that I didn't smudge things. Didn't necessarily get the full board completed, but I usually don't, so I'm not too worried. In terms of the project page for this month, it was all about my office organisation project, so thinking about the different areas that I wanted to declutter. Definitely still have some of these to do, unfortunately. Things that I needed to buy for the office, and then just general tasks that I needed to work on. This is actually sadly still an ongoing project for me because I've just had other things come up that have kind of pulled my attention. But in terms of my week 1 setup, this one was very simple. Just a meals space and a priorities space, because I didn't really need to include the routines, they were already on this tracker here. After that though, we have the daily logging, just using those printed headers, which I thought were really cute, and then putting in some little decoration like on the headers and then also around the page. I don't usually use the quotes that come on the PET tapes from the washi tape shop because they're usually not something I really need to have in my journal, but there were a lot of them on this roll, so I decided to use the occasional one here and there. We have week 2, meals and priorities, more daily logs. I didn't have a sticker that said life admin, so I did that lettering myself, feeling very proud of how well it matched the rest of the lettering. This is not my regular lettering style, it is not something I am super comfortable with. We then have some more daily logs, a space for a brainstorm, and a space for my mid-month review. This was again me trying to be quite active about actually doing them because I find that they are quite helpful and remotivating me, and doing those in my journal so that I actually know that I did do them and did them properly. Like a complete job was done kind of a thing. Week 3, lots of priorities, obviously getting a lot of stuff done before I went away, or at least trying to. Meals, daily logs, also a little space for my September setup. One of the hard things with doing these little printed headers is trying to predict what headers you will need before the month starts. So for instance, that life admin one, I didn't know I was going to need that, but I figured by the end of this month, I will be thinking about setting up for September. So maybe I want a section for the September setup. I was notably thinking about this one a little bit earlier than usual because I knew I was going away in the 4th week. So I kind of had to get that video ready ahead of time. We have a packing list, we've got the priorities, meal log, all of the daily logging. I have the Sunday header and then nothing written for Sunday, but that's okay. And then here we have September. You can see that transfer that I was talking about. It is a little bit of a bummer, like it's a little bit noticeable, but again, it doesn't really bother me enough to not use them. I like this style of lettering, and I will put up with the transfer if I don't have to draw them myself. This font in particular, I'm pretty sure is called Chomsky. It is one of my favorites. I ended up using it in my reading journal setup because I liked it so much. But in this case, I wanted to do an extended reflections page, so also including in a favorite spot and the level 10 life. I used this one, didn't really use that one. Filling in this reflection page was a bit sporadic. And then for my working on page, which was really just a panel, we have actions, projects, and then just general tasks for the month. Notably didn't have a lot of tasks to record here it seems, but flipping over we have the cyclic calendar plus reset week. That's because this one was coming up to the end of the quarter. I love this tape. This one is from Journal Say, but like as soon as I bought it, it was sold out, which is kind of a bummer because you want to be able to tell people where you can get the cool tape. Finding a red pen to actually match the tape though, that was a little bit tricky, but this theme also gave me an opportunity to use more of the plaid tape. I love the plaid tape. But flipping on over, we have the self-care routine tracker again. I made it to, what, week 1, 2, 3.5 this time before I fell off with it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We have the self-care bingo board, this time including 4x4 rather than just a 3x3 because I had the additional week, so I figured I'd be okay with including a couple more items. I know it says I didn't do my quarter 4 goal setting, but I'm pretty sure I did do that because I certainly had goals in quarter 4. And again, while I didn't do everything, I did get a good chunk of stuff done. I feel good about that. So flipping over, the project plan that we have here is mainly for the end of year planning in terms of video content and what I want to put out on the channel, but I also had a space to review my finances because I was maybe lightly neglecting filling in my budget tracker. Not so great. I did get stuff done though, so I felt good about that, and then promptly let it get out of hand again. In terms of my weekly setups, again these were very simple, just a priorities box and a little meal plan. And then in amongst all of this we have the daily logging, with each of those having those little printed out headers looking very cute, and in amongst those just having the PET tape and the washi decoration. I liked the combination of just the black, the plaid, and also the check tape? I'm like, you're not plaid. Checkerboard tape. I know it looks like the racing flag, but it's a cute tape. I like it. I like using it. This month I also made sure to print off some little migrated headers and stuff like that. Again, just kind of trying to predict what types of headers I would need. So printing off a lot of them that say things like brainstorm or migrated or ideas. Mainly because I know I like to make layout lists in my journal for when I'm doing one of those ideas videos or something similar. Over here though, we have my mid-month review. So it kind of starts on this page, but then also takes up part of this page. In this one we have a goals section, completed, things that are yet to be finished, positive and negative similarities. So for instance, what are the positive similarities between the things that I have managed to do? What means that I have been able to get stuff done? Versus negative similarities, which is like, what is holding me back from taking action on these other things? We have things to prioritize, a mind unwind, things I was taking forward, and things that I wanted to try. After this though, more weeklies, more daily logs. I tried my hand at planning out my lunches as well as my dinners, because even though my rebel brain often kicks in anytime I try and plan meals and stick to a meal plan, I figured that I'd give it a go. Again, I did an alright job. We have mostly check marks in there. Then, because this week had Friday the 13th, I decided to stick some little ghost stickers in here. I also thought that the little cat ghost worked nicely with the color palette we have here. I'm not really a fan of animals in my journal, but this one can stay. It fits the theme, kinda. Over the page though, and we have week 4, priorities, meals. I also had a section for my October setup and planning out what I wanted to include in there. A little ideas list, more daily logging, more of that here. And because I had actually stuffed up the days on my headers, I managed to do a duplicate somewhere. I think the duplicate might have been for the 14th, because I can see that this one is attached but this one is separated, so I obviously wrote Sunday the 14th, and then I had to like go and cut the 15th off of the Monday and cut the 16th off of the Tuesday and so on and so forth. So when we get to this Sunday, I just didn't have a number for it. It's fine. Frustrating though, it is still frustrating. But after this one, we have reset week. For this one, I just considered all of the different areas that I wanted to reset in and went and added some little checklists that I could use to get stuff done. Notably, did not check a lot of stuff off, but things did happen, so I'm not too sure. Maybe I was just doing like, sleepy mode ghost and sleeping on my planner, but that's fine. Rather than doing daily logs, because I didn't have any more of the little headers that I printed off, I just went with the Alistair method. And I had gotten to, I think about here-ish, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna run out of space. I'm not gonna have enough space for all of my tasks. So I drew this section down the side so I could add more tasks in that weren't specifically tied to any day. And then just in doing that, I'm like, ugh, I don't like the way this looks anymore. I'm not going to use this layout. Again, Jess being a persnickety biscuit and not using her journal when she doesn't like how it looks. For October, the theme that I went with was ghosties, and this is a return to a drawn layout. The only other time I've done a drawn setup in this year was in January with those simple botanicals, so this was kind of exciting. It was a little bit of fun to get back into doodling, but I have very much enjoyed using like my PET stickers or washi tapes or anything like that this year. Also, those usually go a lot faster in terms of the setup. Doodling does take me a little while. It's not something I'm like naturally good at. And because I am the kind of person who gets a little bit precious about their planner, it ends up taking me even longer. On here though, we have the reflection space with the various sections that we've seen before, and our working on space, also featuring our little ghost with a plant. This one here was actually drawn to represent an actual plant in my office. Her name is Susie Cato. She's a cutie, but I got her either in September or maybe the start of October. I think it was in September, but I wanted to commemorate the fact that she joined my office party, so we put her in the planner too. After this though, we have the cyclic setup, so the 4 weeks with some decoration. I thought this was very cute. The little spider is a tape, but the rest of it is drawn, at least down this side. These bats and also this little spider, those are a tape as well. So just taking the tape that I used along the top here and cutting out the individual elements. Drawing this ghost was so difficult because I didn't really have a reference for it. So trying to find like the arrangement of the arm took such a long time. Like even drawing simple doodles, it takes me forever. I still like it though. I still think it was fun. I do wish that I had better matched the orange in the pen to the orange in the tape, but yeah, it's not perfect, it's okay. These little ghosties I thought were a lot of fun, because one of the things that I like to do for my birthday every year, and my birthday is in October, is have a favourite things day. So I wanted to draw some ghosties celebrating some of my favourite things, like having bubble tea, having some donuts, hanging out with their friends, and also wearing silly hats it seems, because that's kind of cute as well. Here we have the self-care bingo, notably with some of that transfer from the other sticker on the other side. A little unfortunate, it doesn't bother me too much. I managed to get almost all of this one done. I didn't manage to batch cook a lunch, but 8 out of 9 isn't bad. On this side of the layout though, I wanted to do something to kind of like commemorate my birthday, so I turned 33 in October on the 11th, which I feel is kind of special. 33 on 11? Ooh. But I just wanted to record some of my favourite things, and then some notes about my birthday and what I did on the actual day, and also a little selfie of me on the day as well. Here we have a ghostie enjoying a little stack of books, and this one was drawn to represent the icon that we have that represents me in the Boudreaux Buddies book club space. Each of the Boudreaux Buddy book club leaders have a little ghost that kind of represents them, and this is my little ghost. So flipping over, we have the work outputs layout. I made a post section thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna post on Instagram. Ha 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 ha. Nope, did not happen. Membership perks, videos, newsletters, and then over here we have my packing list with a little ghost who is ready to roll out. They've got their case, they're all packed up, and they're going on the Sydney Bookshop Hop. The Sydney Bookshop Hop was a lot of fun. That one was very much a highlight for October. But in terms of these sections we have, you can see I have the return of the ruled boxes, so you know that in November, not having those those again. But we have a little meal plan, priorities, routines. One of the things that I tried to do in October, or like in preparation for October, was pre-plan where my weekly sections were going to be, because I knew it was going to be a busy month, you know, with going away and having to get ready for Vlogmas and all of that kind of thing. So I wanted to see if there was any possibility of me kind of like pre-sectioning out where I was putting my weekly sections. I think at least at the start of the month, I did a pretty good job of estimating where they needed to be, because like this is the week 2 related stuff and this is the first day of week 2, so that's not too bad. But if we flip on over, then I put in my mid-month review, by which at this point we were only at Friday, which means that flipping over from that, we have the week 3 set up, and we still have Saturday and Sunday here, which means I only really got Monday and a little bit of Tuesday. We have a little ghost with a little Australia tour guide handbook kind of thing, because by this point I was off on my trip, and I wanted to write down some notes about our trip, about like things that were happening and stuff, because although I do have a couple of notes in my 5-year journal, that's not really all that much space to write down. It's only 3 lines for each day, and we did a lot of stuff, so I wanted to make sure I recorded a fairly decent log of what we got up to. Notably, this is the end of week 3, so then we have the week 4 stuff, and then week 4's dailies actually start here. Not the worst, not the best. By Wednesday though, we were back in the country. I also wanted to have a planning space for the Bujo Buddies book club for 2025, just so we knew who was going to be picking the read themes each month, if we were changing up any of the rules, anything like that. I did love including this tape because I just love this tape in general, to the extent where I think I used quite a lot of it. I don't necessarily think the tape perfectly matches my doodles, mainly because the ghost style in this is not really the same as the ghost style that I was drawing. But to round out the space down here, I put in a before next month box and did not use it. And then we're into November, or cycle 11, cycle 2 of quarter 4. For this one, I don't know why, but I was just really drawn to the idea of using waterfall tabs, or waterfall Dutch doors. And in particular, I wanted to use this series of washi tapes to do it. It's kind of funny because, you know, I'm seeing online like all of these fall inspired things and like, oh, it's Thanksgiving time and everything's cozy, and I'm like, nope, we're headed into summer and things are getting hot. Blah. Hot weather is not my favorite weather, but I figured I would just embrace the fall season anyway and go with a theme that felt a little bit more cozy fall inspired. We have the reflection page, which notably got a lot more filled in compared to some previous months, and the working on section, which I didn't fill in until like the last day using these pages, and that's why I don't have much of a task list here, / a task list at all. But after this, because I was using those waterfall tabs or waterfall Dutch doors, this page has a decent chunk cut out of it, or like decent in the sense that I couldn't really fit my monthly calendar on here. So I instead went into the self-care bingo board and my work outputs layout, this one having a lot more space for videos because I was saying, oh, can I get ahead on Vlogmas? No. I did not do that. I wish I had, but I did not. We had a space for newsletters, space for memberships, and then after this one we have the monthly calendar, cyclic calendar. Something that was a little bit fun this month is using paint pens in my journal. So I've previously said that paint pens are kind of my nemesis, but I think that's because I hadn't found the right paint pens for me. These ones actually dried really quick, they didn't require any priming, you could just put them straight down into the journal, which was really nice, and I appreciated how the color palette of those quite nicely matched the tape that we had. I only really used it in the start of setup here, like on these headers and around this self-care bingo space and then on the monthly log. But after that we are into my weekly pages, or, you know, weekly little dashboard, and then my daily stuff, making full use of all of the space. In terms of the decoration here, I just used a little piece of washi tape every so often to kind of break up some of the walls of text. But I made really good use of my journal this month. I felt very good about getting in and writing stuff down. In particular, you might be able to see that there are these little highlighted dots at the start of each day, and that's what we call the daily highlight. That's effectively that one thing that you want to do in the day. Like, you want to get to the end of the day being like, yes, I got that thing checked off, or I did that thing. It could be a highlight in the sense of like something that was actually kind of fun or brought joy to your day, or for the most part I use it for a productivity tool. Flipping over though, we have the mid-month review. This one I expanded to take up the full spread because I was finding it was always taking up like 3 columns anyway, so might as well just do a very in-depth version, give myself a little extra space. I stuck in in a little gift receipt here saying, a gift from you. I know you like to have a tidy but uniquely decorated to you office, and all of these made me think of you, either for the office, productivity, your pencil case, or for reading. From AJ. It was very exciting. Thank you very much, AJ. I very much enjoyed my little gifties. Flipping on over, we then have the week 3 setup, meals, priorities, routines, all of the daily logging, the little pieces of tape for decoration. Week 4, similar idea again. I know I've already said it, but I love how full my pages look when I use daily logging. When I just use up as much space as I need, then slap down the next header and get on to my next list. You can also probably see that in a lot of these days, I do write a lot of stuff down. Part of that is because I like to break my tasks up into bite-sized pieces so that they just feel kind of more approachable, though I also know that if I wrote out a list like this for some people, they'd be like, oh my god, that's way too much stuff. But I find that because they're all little things, or like a good chunk of them are little things, it helps build up that momentum, and I'm like, yeah, I can do the thing, rah rah, fight the power, I'm gonna get this list done. Of course, sometimes I don't do all of the stuff, and that's fine too, but it's just very therapeutic to get this stuff out of my head and onto the paper. If I was setting up weekly structures for this, like given the fact that Tuesday was this long and then Wednesday is that long, like how do you predict that? I don't know. This is why I don't use a traditional weekly log, but after this one, we are into the December pages. Now, notably at this stage, December is not 100% over, so I still have time to fill in my monthly reflection. We can't say that I've like failed the layout or anything, because at the time of filming this, we still have like at least 10 days left. We have my actions list, projects, tasks. This lessons space is actually for the monthly reflection, but because I was putting this decoration in the corners, it meant that the space on here was a little bit tighter than usual. To make my decoration easy for the month, I decided to go with these stickers from the washi tape shop. They're not necessarily like my favorite of all of the Christmas tapes I've used. I do think they're a little bit cute, but what I like even more is the stenciling work in the corners. I don't do a lot of work with stamps and stencils and that kind of stuff, but I'm thinking next year I might try to include more of it because this was actually a lot of fun. I utilized it on pretty much every layout in the setup in some way, shape or form, just to kind of tie all the pages together. But here we have an expanded cyclic calendar. So rather than just the 4 weeks of the cycle, we also have reset week, and we also have the first week of my like new year, mainly because the 30th and 31st were in there, so I just wanted to include them. My new year is going to start on the 30th because of my cyclic planning that I like to do. We have a separate video on the channel explaining how that works and how I use it, why I use it. But flipping on over, we have the work outputs layout, which I have definitely done more of these than I've been checking in with, because even though I haven't been using my monthly stuff as well as I could, I've been really good about using my daily logs. Like, this stuff is going good. We'll look at that in a second. Like, if I were to go through and check off some of the things that actually have been done, you can see I am a little bit behind in using this layout, but I'm not so bothered about it. Stuff's happening, it's all good. Like, yes, this is good to get that bird's eye view of where everything's at, especially if I'm working on multiple videos at once, but I've been on such a like head down, on the grind, getting the content out that I haven't really checked in with this one. We do have the self-care bingo layout, and I'm very excited to be making gingerbread houses tomorrow, so that will get checked off. But then after this one, we have a gift planning space, and then we're straight on into week 1, my plan for week 1, my neglected meal tracker, and all of my daily logs. And this one also uses printed headers, even though it's a lettering style that I could probably do myself. I just like the consistency of these, all of the lettering is very uniform. One of the reasons in particular that I chose this lettering style was 1, I thought it kind of matched the decoration, kind of looked like it was a similar vibe, and 2, for the ones that I'd used last month, we had hanging letters, which made the cutting out process of these ones, especially considering every day ends in Y, which is a hanging letter. Cutting these out took so much longer, so I was like, nope, we are picking one that is all like one level on the top and bottom, nice and easy to cut out, especially because this is the busy season. We want to make sure that we make setting up the journal as easy as possible. So daily logging, week 2, meals, routines, priorities. Then flipping over, more daily logging, a little ideas space, more of those washi sticker decorations. But you can see that like, even though it has been busy, things have been hectic, you know, lots to do and such, a video a day on the channel is no small feat, I've still been getting in and using this, and it just feels like a growth moment. Here we have the mid-month review though, so those sections of goals, other projects, things I've achieved, things that are incomplete, any challenges, any similarities. For instance, if it's not Vlogmas, it's not a priority. Any learnings that I've had, things I'm taking forward, priorities, and a brainstorm. or brain dump, mind unwind, whatever you want to call it. I'll give you 3 guesses what comes next. Oh my gosh, it's more daily logging and the weekly. This one here though is the little card that I got for hitting 100k on my YouTube channel. So if you're a subscriber, thank you so much. This is because of you. If you're not a subscriber, let's get to the next milestone together. Make sure that you're subscribed. Just in case you wanted to see it, here is my play button. It's very shiny. You can also see my camera up there. Like, what if we do this? Hello. But you can see, presented to JashiiCorrin for passing 100,000 subs. So that one can go back on the shelf though, because we still have pages to flip through. So we have Sunday 15th, then we have week 4, priorities, meals, routines. I left a lot of space for priorities, but this stuff is taking me a little bit longer because some of these videos are a little bit longer. Then the daily logging from this week, and then we're on to where I'm currently at. After this though, I know I'm still gonna have some more daily logs for the rest of the year, so I wanted to pre-decorate those with the little stencily pieces, mainly because I don't want to have to get out the stenciling equipment for every single page. Like for instance, if we go back and have a look here, this one went from Monday to Wednesday. So I'd get them out on Monday to set it up, and then I'd have to get them out again on Thursday to set them up. I'd rather just do them all at the same time. So we have a couple more pages of those. This one I put down the side just for some like difference, a little bit of visual interest. We have an additional page after that. And then in the back of the journal, I also wanted a spot to commemorate our DIY advent calendars that we're making this year, because the bags are kind of small. We can't always fit the present in them. So these are the little tickets that I made for Vogel, or at least some of them. And then these are some of the little tickets he made for me. It's been quite fun. I have a couple more of them that I need to stick in here. And then after that, we have my end of year planning pages. You can see I bought back the yellow tape for this because I just think it's really bright and fun. I always get excited about the end of the year. We have celebrations coming up, we have goal setting for the new year. It's always when I do my yearly reset and things like that. But in terms of pages, we have a space for anything I wanted to do before 2025, so noting things like that down. Also writing in any ideas that I have for my 2025 goals, in particular like my 101 things list, now called 52 and 52. This was going to be effectively like an index for my end of year planning stuff, but I haven't filled it in yet. I don't know if I'm going to, but it looks cute. And then after this, we just have a summary of the weeks. So this one goes from the 14th of October down to the 5th of January, just so I could get kind of a bird's eye view of all the content that was coming out and making sure I'm getting it done. Haven't necessarily checked in with this in a while, but it was good to get that overall view at least to start with, because I knew what I was putting out for Vlogmas like a month and a bit in advance. So having the summary in here, I just found quite helpful. After this though, we have tasks that I wanted to do for the membership, but because I've been so head down, I haven't necessarily come back in here and checked them off. I promise you the stuff for October, November, and most of December has actually gotten done. Similar idea for the stuff with Epic Goals, just haven't come in and checked it off yet. After this though, we have a space to plan out any of the stuff related to Discord. So this was scheduling in events, we had a little task list, looking through any of the chat spaces and making sure they're still active, and also a space to write down any of the things that we needed to do for the Bujo Buddies book club. Even though I haven't utilized these layouts as much as I would have hoped, I do still appreciate having them here because it got me thinking about these things earlier than like, I don't know, midway through December. While this one says a month of planning, it is effectively Vlogmas. That's just what I was calling it for myself. So a list of the videos I wanted to make, not actually checking them off. This was for any other content that I wanted to put out, but I don't think there's been anything specifically related to that, so nothing to write about there. The yearly reset I am going to be doing, but I haven't planned it out yet. Effectively, I'll just take each of the different areas of my life and think about how I can reset for the new year, how I can enter the new year feeling cool, calm, and collected in all of those areas, or like as much as I can. And then after this one, we have my mental reset. This one actually already has a video on the channel, so just going through, doing like a brain dump, thinking about how I'm going to be reflecting on my goals and setting new goals, any tasks that I want to do to take care of my mental health, and anything I want to keep doing, stop doing, or start doing, in particular next year and as related to my mental health. The next one we have was for social event planning, which has definitely been neglected because most of these are over now, but if anything, it at least gives me a summary of the stuff that was going on. As I kind of said before, if I don't really utilize a layout, it doesn't really bother me. Like sometimes things in our journal just don't get used. This space though has been used because this was where I was planning out for my 2025 planners. So thinking about the journals that I had this year, am I going to be, doing a flip through? Am I going to be taking them forward next year? What's my lineup for next year looking like? What kind of content do I have for either new journals and setting those up, or the old journals and flipping through them? And then just planning out the layouts I wanted to include in those things. Down the bottom here I was playing with a stencil and I was just like, there's no way good in my journal to do this, I'll just do it here. What a mess. This one though I did continue over to the other side so I could have stuff related to the long-term collections journal, my swatch book, and also my reading journal. These two and also these two, well, three, already have set up videos on the channel. After this though, we get into what would usually be called the washi graveyard, but is kind of more like a sticker swamp. In this one in particular, Rachel initially gave me this sticker because she had a duplicate of it, and then she started going through her sticker books and saying like, I'm gonna throw this sticker book out, I don't really want this, but this sticker's too cute, it has to go somewhere. So we just started sticking them all over this page. So I effectively just kind of lightly sticker bombed the back of my journal, whether that be with some of the titles that I printed out for my setups, or little bits and pieces of washi or other stickers that I got at like Go Wild or something like that. And then in the back here we have some bits and pieces of ephemera. So we've got some pictures from Emily and George's wedding, which is very sweet. We have the breakdown of how many unused journals I had, something ridiculous. Some settings, a card that got left in our letterbox that I do not need anymore. We've got all of the little ideas we had for doing different movie marathons. We'll get around to them at some point. My pictures from Go Wild with Sarah Cannon or Heart Breathings. And then also pictures that Rachel, I don't know why, but she didn't want to put them in her wedding photo album. Why would she not want these? These are the most beautiful pictures that anybody has ever seen ever. Oh my god, they're terrible, but I wanted to keep them, so I put them in the back of my journal. Tucking those safely into the back though, as we saw, not every layout I set up in my journal gets used 100%, and I'm actually completely okay with that. Every time I set up a layout and it does or doesn't work, it gives me an opportunity to reflect on what does or doesn't work for me as a planner. I've really loved using my journals this year, and I am so excited for next year. We already have setups for the majority of them on the channel, so if you wanted to see what my setups for next year look like, which layouts made the cut and are getting taken forward, then this playlist is the next one to check out. In that one we have my yearly collections, my everyday journal, my long-term collections, and my reading journal, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.